Picture this. Two guys walk into the same party. First guy, he's checking his phone every 30 seconds, scanning the room to see who's looking at him, laughing a little too loud at his own jokes. Second guy, he's leaning against the wall, genuinely absorbed in conversation with whoever he's talking to, completely unaware that three different people across the room keep glancing his way. 6 months later, guess which one people are still talking about? The uncomfortable truth nobody wants to admit is that the moment you stop caring about being wanted is precisely when people start obsessing over you. And I'm not talking about some manipulative tactic or playing hard to get. I'm talking about something far more powerful and far more real. Let me show you how this actually works, because what's happening psychologically is fascinating. Think about the last time someone desperately wanted your validation. Maybe it was a coworker constantly seeking approval for their ideas, or that friend who needs reassurance after every single decision they make. How did that feel? Draining, right? Now, think about someone in your life who genuinely doesn't need anything from you. They're just good. There's something magnetic about that energy, isn't there? Here's what most people miss. Human beings are wired to pursue what moves away from us and take for granted what chases us. It's called the scarcity principle, but it goes deeper than that. When someone is unbothered by whether you like them, approve of them, or choose them, they're communicating something profound at a subconscious level. They're saying, my internal world is so rich, so complete, that your opinion of me is just optional. That's psychological catnip. Let that sink in for a second. Every time you chase validation, every time you angle for approval, you're essentially advertising that you need something outside yourself to feel whole. And people can smell that from a mile away. But here's where it gets interesting. The unbothered man isn't actually indifferent to people. That's the part everyone gets wrong when they try to fake this energy. I knew this guy named Marcus who worked at a coffee shop I used to frequent. He wasn't particularly handsome by conventional standards, didn't dress like he walked out of a magazine, drove a beat-up Honda Civic. But I watched something unfold over the months that was absolutely wild. The regular customers, especially women, would literally rearrange their schedules to come in during his shifts. They'd bring him homemade cookies, ask for his music recommendations, find excuses to extend conversations. Marcus wasn't playing aloof. He was genuinely engaged when people talked to him, gave thoughtful responses, remembered details about their lives. The difference? He didn't change his energy one bit whether someone was interested in him or not. He was the same warm, focused person with the 70-year-old man ordering black coffee as he was with the attractive woman trying to flirt with him. Here's the thing. That consistency is what drove people crazy. There was no game to figure out, no code to crack, no special combination of words or actions that would make him suddenly pay more attention to them. He was already giving his full attention in the moment, then moving on with his life completely unfazed. Think about this. When you're trying to win someone over, you're essentially creating a puzzle for them to solve. If I do X, maybe they'll like me. If I say Y, maybe they'll notice me. But when you're genuinely unbothered, there is no puzzle. You're just living your life in full color, and people either vibe with it or they don't. That lack of manipulation is incredibly rare, and rarity creates value. Now, let me show you something that'll probably make you uncomfortable. Most people operate in relationships like emotional stock traders. They're constantly calculating. I gave them a compliment, now they owe me one back. I initiated the last 3 conversations, so they should reach out next. I showed vulnerability, so they need to match that energy. The unbothered man, he's not even playing that game. He's operating in an entirely different economy. When you give your time, attention, or energy because you genuinely want to, not because you're expecting a return on investment, you completely sidestep the entire transaction dynamic. And here's what happens. People are so used to relationships being transactional that when they encounter someone who isn't keeping score, their brain short circuits a little bit. I remember this woman telling me about a guy she dated briefly. She said, "He was the weirdest experience I've ever had. I tested him once by not texting him back for 2 days. You know what he did? Nothing. Didn't double text, didn't get passive aggressive, didn't ask if everything was okay. When I finally reached out, he was just normal. Happy to hear from me, but clearly his world hadn't. Stopped spinning because I went quiet for 48 hours. She admitted it made her more obsessed with him than any guy who chased her relentlessly. Why? Because she couldn't shake him, couldn't make him anxious, couldn't control him with withdrawal. His emotional state wasn't tethered to her behavior, and that was intoxicating. Here's where we need to go deeper, because this isn't about acting unbothered. You can't fake this long term, and that's where most guys screw it up. The reason truly unbothered men trigger obsession is because their unbothered nature comes from genuine internal abundance. Their lives are so full of purpose, passion, projects, and personal growth that any individual person becomes a potential addition to an already fulfilling life, not the solution to an empty one. When your happiness isn't dependent on whether someone texts you back, whether that date goes well, whether your crush notices your new haircut, you radiate a completely different frequency. People pick up on this at an instinctive level. It's like the difference between someone who's casually browsing a store versus someone who desperately needs to buy something before the store closes. The energy is unmistakable, but here's what most people miss about building this genuine abundance. It's not about becoming cold or detached or pretending you don't have emotions. It's about filling your life with so many sources of meaning and joy that no single person can make or break your emotional state. I know a musician named David who embodies this perfectly. He's deeply passionate about his craft, teaches guitar to kids in underserved communities, has a close-knit group of friends he's known for years, trains for marathons, reads voraciously. When he meets someone romantically, he's genuinely interested and present. But if it doesn't work out, he's got a full, rich life to return to. He's not devastated because she wasn't the axis his world revolved around. She was a person he enjoyed connecting with, and if the connection fades, he wishes her well and keeps living. Women in his life have told me they find this absolutely maddening in the best way possible. They want to matter more. They want to be the exception. They want to crack that code and become central to his world. But the irony? The moment they would succeed in making him need them, they'd probably lose interest. Now, we're getting into the real psychology here. Stay with me, because this is where it clicks. Every interaction between two people is essentially a negotiation about whose frame, whose reality dominates the interaction. When you're bothered by someone's opinion of you, you've entered their frame. You've accepted that their judgment of you matters more than your judgment of yourself. The unbothered man maintains his own frame effortlessly, not through dominance or aggression, but through genuine self-assurance. He's not trying to convince you of his value because he's not questioning it himself. Here's a real scenario to illustrate this. Two guys are talking to the same woman at a networking event. First guy starts subtly competing, mentioning his job title, name-dropping people he knows, trying to establish superiority. He's entered a frame where he needs to prove he's the better option. Second guy, he just continues having a genuine conversation about something he's passionate about, asks thoughtful questions, laughs at himself when he misspeaks. He's not competing because he's not operating in a frame where other men are threats or where this woman's choice validates his worth. Guess who she's thinking about on the drive home? The unbothered energy says, I'm going to be exactly who I am, and the right people will appreciate that. The wrong people won't, and that's okay, because it saves us both time. That level of self-certainty is rare enough that when people encounter it, they become fascinated. But here's where it gets really interesting, and this is something you need to understand if you want to actually embody this energy rather than fake it. Unbothered men aren't immune to rejection because they don't feel it. They're unbothered because they've fundamentally reframed what rejection means. Most people experience rejection as a statement about their worth. She rejected me, therefore I'm not good enough. The unbothered man experiences rejection as information. She rejected me, therefore we're not compatible. Good to know. You see the difference? One makes it existential, the other makes it practical. I watched my friend Jake go through this transformation in real time. He used to be the guy who'd be devastated for weeks if a date didn't go well, analyzing every word he said, convinced he'd blown his one chance at happiness. Then something shifted. He started pouring energy into building a business he actually cared about, got serious about his health, started saying no to social obligations that drained him. 6 months later, I barely recognized his energy. He went on a date with someone who clearly wasn't feeling it, and you know what he said afterward? Nice person, not my person. Anyway, I'm heading to the climbing gym. Wanna come? The lack of emotional spiral was startling. And you know what happened? Word got around their mutual friend group that Jake had become mysteriously different. Suddenly, people who had never shown interest before were curious. What changed? Why doesn't he care anymore? What does he know that we don't? Nothing had changed except his relationship with his own worth. It was no longer up for debate based on other people's responses. Let me show you something that ties all of this together. Unbothered men are obsession-inducing because they're fully present in the moment without being desperate for the moment to become something else. Think about how rare that is. How often are you in a conversation but secretly hoping it leads somewhere? Hoping they like you, hoping they're impressed, hoping this turns into something more. That hope creates a subtle tension, a neediness that people can feel even if they can't name it. When you're genuinely unbothered, you can be fully engaged in the conversation for what it is right now, not for what it might become later. You can enjoy someone's company without needing them to enjoy yours in return. You can be vulnerable without needing reciprocation. You can invest without expecting returns. That freedom is intoxicating to be around. I knew this professor in college named Dr. Reed who had this quality. His office hours were always packed, not because he was an easy grader or particularly entertaining, but because when you talked to him, he was absolutely present. No checking his phone, no eyes darting to the clock, no sense that he was waiting for you to leave so he could get to something more important. Students, especially those used to being dismissed or half listened to, became almost addicted to that level of attention. They'd sign up for his classes specifically to be in his orbit. He wasn't trying to be liked. He was just genuinely interested in ideas and the people sharing them, completely unbothered by departmental politics, tenure concerns, or his reputation. Now, here's the part that's going to sound counterintuitive, but stick with me. Unbothered men trigger obsession because they present a challenge, but not in the way most people think. It's not about being difficult or playing games. It's about being someone whose approval actually means something, because it's not freely given to everyone. When you're desperate for connection, your approval is worthless. Sorry to be blunt, but it's true. If you're showing interest in everyone who gives you the time of day, your attention has no value. But when you're genuinely selective, when you're unbothered enough to walk away from connections that don't align with your values or energy, suddenly your interest becomes valuable. Here's the thing. People don't obsess over what they can easily have. They obsess over what challenges them to level up. A woman I know named Sarah told me about this experience that perfectly captures this. She was used to dating guys who were immediately available, always responsive, clearly more interested in her than she was in them. Then she met someone who was genuinely busy building something he cared about. He'd take hours to respond to texts, not as a game, but because he was focused on his work. He'd suggest dates a week out because his schedule was actually full. She said it drove her insane at first. She was used to being the prize, the one with options, the one who decided if things move forward. But his unbothered energy forced her to actually consider, do I genuinely like this person, or do I just like the validation they give me? Eventually, she realized she was more invested in him than anyone she'd dated in years, precisely because his world didn't revolve around her. She had to earn her place in his life, and that made the connection feel infinitely more valuable. But here's where we need to address the elephant in the room. You're probably wondering, okay, so how do I become unbothered? And that's exactly the wrong question, because it implies you're trying to adopt a strategy, play a role, manufacture an image. The truth is, you can't strategize your way into genuine unbothered energy. People's radar for authenticity is incredibly sophisticated. They can tell the difference between someone who's genuinely content with themselves and someone who's performing contentment to manipulate a specific outcome. Real unbothered energy comes from doing the internal work. It comes from building a life you don't need to escape from. It comes from healing the wounds that make you seek external validation. It comes from developing skills, passions, and purposes that make you inherently interesting to yourself. When you're trying to be unbothered, you're still bothered by whether you appear unbothered. You see the paradox? The guy who's checking himself every 5 minutes to make sure he's not coming across as too eager, still bothered. The guy who's deliberately waiting hours to text back to seem busy, still bothered. The guy who's acting aloof to create mystery, still bothered. The genuinely unbothered man isn't thinking about any of this. He's responding when he has something to say. He's engaging when he feels engaged. He's pulling back when his energy tells him to, not when some dating strategy dictates he should. So, what do you actually do with all of this? First, stop trying to be unbothered and start building a life that makes you naturally unbothered. What would your life look like if you weren't trying to impress anyone? What projects would you pursue? What hobbies would you explore? What boundaries would you set? Start there. Fill your life with pursuits that genuinely excite you, not pursuits that look impressive to other people. The guy obsessed with vintage motorcycles because he loves the mechanics, and the culture is infinitely more attractive than the guy who bought a motorcycle because he thought it would make him look cool. Second, practice being okay with people not choosing you. I know that sounds harsh, but it's liberating. Every person who doesn't vibe with your energy is just saving you both time. They're not rejecting your worth. They're revealing compatibility. When you internalize that, rejection stops being painful and starts being useful information. Third, become aware of when you're performing versus when you're being. Notice the moments you're calculating your words, managing your image, trying to control how someone perceives you. Those are the moments you've left your frame and entered theirs. Those are the moments your power evaporates. The goal isn't to never care about anyone. The goal is to care about people from a place of abundance rather than scarcity, to enjoy connection without needing it, to offer your authentic self without needing approval of that self. Look, the unbothered man triggers obsession without trying because he's solved the fundamental equation that most people spend their entire lives struggling with. He's figured out that his worth isn't up for debate, that his peace isn't conditional on other people's responses, that his life is full whether or not any particular person chooses to be part of it. And paradoxically, the moment you truly don't need someone to complete you is the moment you become most capable of genuinely connecting with them, because you're no longer bringing neediness, desperation, or hidden agendas. You're just bringing yourself, take it or leave it. That energy is rare. That energy is magnetic. That energy changes everything. The question isn't whether you can fake it. The question is, are you willing to do the work to become it?